So today I'm going to show you guys how to do a 1-inch grid on your photo and then a 2-inch grid on your big drawing paper that you guys have in your portfolio. So everybody should have a photo that is measuring at 6 inches by 9 inches. You're able to do this by saving the photo into a Google Doc and then resizing the image to a 6 by 9 by either cropping it or making it bigger. So there's a couple different ways that you were able to do that. So what we need to do now, since we have our photos, is we need to draw out our grid. So whenever we draw any type of lines, we always use what I call my rule of 3, which is you are going to measure up along the edge of your photo, and we're going to be doing a 1-inch grid. So we are going to mark lines at every single 1 inch. So you'll end up with 8 marks. Now if your picture is a little bit bigger than 9 inches or a little bit bigger than 6 inches, it's okay. You'll just have a little bit extra on the bottom there, but that's nothing too big a deal. And then we're going to use our rule of 3, where we're going to measure this in 3 different spots before we start drawing our lines. So that way we can ensure our lines are completely straight and not slanted. So again, I'm just making little marks at every single 1 inch. And then I'm going to do that again. So you do this a total of 3 times. Okay, pause the video if you are still drawing your marks. Now moving on to your next step. Now that we have 3 marks 8 times, we're going to line up those 3 marks together with our ruler, making sure our ruler does not move. We are going to draw a straight line down. This is going to give us our 1-inch area with a 6-inch rectangle. So it's a 1-inch by 6-inch rectangle. You'll have 8 of those. Or 9 of those, excuse me. You'll end up with 9 rectangles because it's a 9-inch photo. And the reason we're doing a 6-inch by 9-inch photo is because your paper that you will be getting is going to be 12-inch by 18-inch, which you should already have one in your portfolio if you are at home working. Remember, we passed those out at the beginning of the year just in case you ended up going homebound and needed materials at home. Alright, so finish drawing all of your lines and it will end up looking something like this. Pause the video if you are still drawing your lines. Next step is we're going to turn our paper and we're going to line our ruler up with the bottom of our photo, and we're going to again draw a mark at every 1 inch, and then we're going to use our rule of 3 and we're going to continue to mark at every 1 inch in the middle, and at the end you're going to end up with 5 marks. Okay, pause the video if you are still drawing your marks. Now that we have all of our marks, the next step is we're going to line up those 3 marks just like we did on the first one, and we're going to draw our line. This is going to give us our 1 inch squares for our 1 inch gridded photo. So every square that you draw should be at least a 1 inch by 1 inch. If your measurements are off, that means that you did not measure your lines correctly. Now, if you do end up making a mistake, try not to erase too much on your photo because you may end up erasing some of your ink off of your photo. Okay, pause the video if you are still drawing your lines. Okay, next step. Everybody should have the handout here with the gridding instructions. This is also located on our Google Classroom underneath our new assignment. You're going to label your photo so that way we know which square we're going to be working on. If your picture is portrait up and down, you're going to use this grid. If your picture is landscape, which is long ways, you're going to use this grid. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and label mine as if it was landscape. So I'm going to label this one 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because it's 6 inches. And then along the top of it, I'm going to label it with letters A through I because there's 9. It's 9 inches. So it'd go all the way to I. Now if you were using the portrait one, you would label 1 through 8 on the left side and A through F on the top. Okay, and now your photo is completely gridded and we are ready to move on to our big paper. Pause the video if you are still working. Okay, next thing you have is your big paper. Now this side I've already gridded, so this is how it's going to turn out looking like. So we did 1 inch grid on our photo, but we want to enlarge that photo because our paper is bigger. So since we did 1 inch on our photo, we're going to do a 2 inch grid on our paper. Okay, so we're going to line it up at the top of the paper and we're going to make our marks at every 2 inch. So you're going to do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and 16. And again, we're going to follow our rule of 3. So we're going to do that 3 times. Now it's important that you don't draw really dark. Look at me, I did a 1 inch. It's important that you don't draw really dark on this paper because this paper is thick. And we are going to be erasing our grid at the end. And if you draw too dark, you're going to leave pencil marks and you're also going to indent in your paper. So we want to avoid that. So I'm going to do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. So I got my rule of 3. So I've got 3 dots all the way across. Pause it if you are still working on that step. Okay, our next step will be to line up our dots and draw our grid. And now we're going to end up with our 2 inch by 12 inch rectangles because our paper is 12 inches wide. Remember, when you're drawing your grid, draw lightly. I'm drawing dark so that way you guys could see it a little better on my projector. And we're just repeating the same process we did on the photo, just as a bigger grid. Okay, pause the video if you are still drawing your lines. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to start our lines on the other side. So again, it's 2 inch. So we're doing 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Follow our rule of 3. So we're going to do this 3 times. It's very important that you follow the rule of 3, because otherwise your lines will not come up straight. It gives you a spot to line your ruler up with. And your lines might not be perfect. Your measuring might not be perfect. It should come up pretty close. Okay, so I've got my lines, or my dots. So now it's time for me to line up. Pause the video if you are still drawing your dots. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start drawing our dots, our lines lining up with our dots, and then this is going to give us our 2-inch grid. And you're going to end up with your entire gridded paper. Okay. So, pause the video if you're still gridding your big paper. Okay, so our next step now is to label our grid just like we did our photo, except we don't have a border here, so we're going to label on the inside of our grid. So with this, make sure you're drawing lightly so you can erase this at the end. So this one's going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I. And then labeling downwards, we're going to put a 1 underneath the A, and then it's going to be labeled through 6. Okay. And then that is the gridding method. The reason we are labeling our grid is because when you are drawing your photo, and say you are drawing here, and you want to draw whatever is in this square here. So I can find out this square is at C2. So then I can find C and 2 and find where it matches up, and this would be where I would draw. Okay, it's just a tool for you, and it helps you locate where you are drawing. Please email me or send me a message on Google Classroom with any questions that you may or may not have. Have a great weekend.